Chapter 2 Asian Paints 7 Decades of Excellence. The year 1942 was a tumultuous one. World War II was on and British forces were battling Germany in Europe and Japan in Sri Lanka. In the last few years of British rule, Gandhiji launched 38. J.R.D. Tata was appointed the chairman of Tata Group. At 34 years, he was then the youngest member of the Tata Sons board. The Birlas were setting up their manufacturing empire. In those volatile days, the paint industry in India comprised a few foreign companies and Indian players like Shalimar Paints. It on paint imports during World War II resulted in an opportunity for domestic production. Spotting this opportunity, a 26-year-old entrepreneur, Champaklal H. Choksi, and three of his friends, Chimanlal N. Choksi, not related to Choksi, Suryakant C. Dani, and Arvind R. Vakil, set up Asian Paints in Mumbai. By 1967, Asian Paints had become the largest paint company of India, a position it holds until this day. Champak Bhai, as he was affectionately known, passed away on 31 July 1997. Also the last day of his family holding a stake in Asian Paints. The families of the other three founders continued to own 52.8% of the firm's outstanding shares. As Asian Paints nears its 75th anniversary in 2017, it stands out as an exemplary case study of a homegrown brand taking on competition, domestic and foreign, and winning in India. It is also a rare example of a large Indian company held by multiple promoters and yet run by high caliber professional management team. The remarkable consistency in revenue growth. Founders take it to the number one spot. Phase 1, 1942 to 67. Champaklal Choksi was a visionary, a father figure, and a statesman to the paint industry. He laid the foundation of Asian Paints by being a superb gap analyst and looking at what the competition was not doing. Said Anup Hoon, former National Sales Manager, Decorative of Asian Paints from 1991 to 94. In our discussions with him on October 2015, Choksi's strength lay in identifying consumption trends and patterns early and devising strategies around them. Once this was done, he would test these strategies, choose the winning approach, and focus consistently on improving processes. Back in the 1940s, Choksi chose the decorative retail segment instead of industrial paints. He saw the industrial paints business was price driven instead of industrial paints. And the company with the lowest price won the business for that year. However, decorative retail was inherently different. It had the potential of building sustainable strengths around relationship with dealers, distributors, and also had strong brand recall. Choksi bet his fortune within this consumer-facing segment of paints. In the 1940s and 50s, decorative paints was a commodity business consisting mainly of dry distemper, also called tuna in local parlance. Distemper is the most basic form of paint and consists mainly of coloring agents, chalk and lime. Choksi's challenge was to establish the supply of paint across India. After being ignored by these distributors in big cities like Mumbai and Pune, Choksi and his partners took to the villages to sell directly to the shopkeepers. This is where Choksi hit pay dirt. Asian Paints opened its first dealership in a small town called Sangli near Satara in Maharashtra. Shopkeepers in smaller towns felt pampered while dealing directly with the company rather than dealing with the distributors. They were also getting the product at a better price. The company's ability to understand consumption patterns are legendary, as can be seen in this example. During the Pongal festival in Tamil Nadu at January and the Pola festival in Maharashtra at August, villages worship their bulls. Choksi noticed that these festivals brought with it a unique demand for painting the horns of bulls, where paint was required in bright colors and in small quantities of 50 to 100 milliliter packs. He saw the opportunity and succeeded in breaking into this market. Similarly, the bottom panel of the front doors of homes in Tamil Nadu have small stripes painted in red and yellow, which is considered auspicious. This was yet another market for Asian Paints. As a former employee of the company recalls, Champak Bhai used Kare, A poor household will always color its entrance door even if they do not paint the rest of the house. Also, the cattle stick their horns into mud and marsh, so the product packs has to be small and the product quality has to be long lasting. If that means our margins will be under pressure, so be it. These products rose, dealers in small towns and cities started stocking them. As a result of these, larger distributions in bigger cities who previously did not want to sell their products started partnering with the company. The approach of building the business from rural to urban India and delivering on untapped customer demand helped the company reach an annual turnover of 23 crores with 2% PBT margin in 1952, a decade after it was founded. Choksi kept noticing the gaps in consumer demand. In the cities, for example, he saw the difference between basic distemper and the more expensive plastic emulsion paint, which was launched by Jensen and Nicholson under the brand name Robialac. While dry distemper was cheap, it had a tendency to peel off walls, stick to clothes, and stink badly. On the other hand, plastic emulsion was free from these problems, but was 5 times costlier than the dry distemper and hence unaffordable. Thus, during the 1950s, Asian Paints launched a new innovative product, the washable distemper, placed between dry distemper and plastic emulsions. This was supported by a highly successful advertising campaign which said, "Advertisement means a cornerstone of the company's marketing strategy." In 1954, the company introduced mascot Gattu, the mischievous kid. The mascot appealed to India's middle-class household. Once again, it was a daring experiment by Choksi and it paid off. During the 1950s and 60s, most of its competitors marine paints and large distributors or institutional orders for decorative paints. In 1967, 25 years after commencing operations, Asian Paints became India's largest company by revenue. During this phase, company's promoters focused on establishing the right product portfolio, the right distribution channel, and strong brand. Was not very profitable during the 1950s, 2% PBT margin and 5% PBT to capital employed ratio in 1952. During 1952 to 62, the revenues grew at a CAGR of 21% with margins rising to 13% by 1962 and PBT per capital employed rising to 26%. Professional management helps scale up operation. Phase 2, 1967 to 97. The promoters realized that the world is evolving around us and homegrown talent is probably not best equipped in this environment. Hence, we needed to hire professionals. A lot of the strengths of the company that we see today evolved from that one basic decision, said KBS Anand in our discussions with him in November 2015. After Asian Paints became the country's largest paint company in 1967, Choksi realized that scaling up the complexities of an expanding direct-to-dealer distribution network and streamlining of systems and processes across various functions. To overcome this hurdle, Choksi started hiring fresh graduates from Indian Institute of Management Ahmedabad and Indian Institute of Management Calcutta and offered them complete authority and responsibility in their roles. The strategy worked and people like Biji Kurian and PM Murthy joined Asian Paints in the late 1960s and early 1970s. Anand, an Indian Institute of Technology Bombay and Indian Institute of Management Calcutta alumnus was hired from the campus in 1970. While Kurian left to lead Berger Paints in the 1970s, Murthy, an IIMC graduate, went on to become Asian Paints head of decorative business and was elevated to MD and CEO in 2009. Anand took over as MD and CEO in 2011. Both Anand and Murthy have been with Asian Paints since 1970s, a testimony to the loyalty that the promoters have enjoyed with their best hires. In the early 1970s, Asian Paints bought its first mainframe that they were the first Indian company to buy a mainframe computer back then. Anand recalls, "I graduated from IITB around the same time and I know that Asian Paints mainframe was better than IITB's." Interestingly enough, this mainframe was not used for payroll or administration process. Instead, it was used for improving service level across the country. Since then, Asian Paint has nurtured the use of data analytics to forecast demand and consistently improve its supply chain efficiency, the single largest driver of competitive advantage for Asian Paints to date. Through the 1970s, the company focused on upgrading its facilities. In 1974, a major modernization program was undertaken to streamline the paint production facilities by improving the layout of machines and replacing old machineries. Hoon recalls, during the period 1967 to 87, the internals of this included computerization of various functions, improvement of supply chain efficiencies and manufacturing plants, productivity, and expansion of capacities. All the other companies couldn't react adequately to what was happening inside Asian Paints, thus taking the company beyond the reach of competition. In 1984, Choksi continued investments in IT automation to strengthen efficiencies. He also focused on expanding the country's manufacturing facilities beyond the west, Maharashtra and Gujarat, into the south, Andhra Pradesh in 1985, backward integration in Tamil Nadu in 1987, and north, Uttar Pradesh in 1990. These plans would go to 2 years before Atul became the managing director. Asian Paints had done its initial public offering on stock exchanges to raise capital, which partly funded the expansion of manufacturing unit. On the brands front, Choksi, known to be aggressive with advertising, launched Utsav and Royal in interior paints and a new segment of exterior paint emulsions under Apex. Finally, he also ventured beyond India and beyond decorative paints. Under him, Asian Paints entered into a technical collaboration arrangement with Nippon Paints for automotive finishes in 1995 and powder coatings in 1992. Joint ventures for paints in Fiji, Tonga, Nepal, and Vanuatu in 1990s, and Queensland, Australia in 1995, and a joint venture in 1997 with PPG Industries USA to manufacture automotive paints and certain industrial products. During these 30 years, its competitors, barring Berger, were either making mistakes around capital misallocation, example Garware Paints, Jensen Nicholson, etc., or were focusing on only the premium segment industry, example ICI. This allowed Asian Paints to widen its gap versus phase. Business process re-engineering and acceleration of market share gains. Phase 3, 1997 to 2015. On 31 July 1997, Choksi passed away at the age of 81. At that time, media reports indicated dissent between Choksi's son Atul and the remaining three promoter families. While Choksi's core promoters Abhay Vakil, Ashwin Choksi and Ashwin Thani dismisses charges of infighting, there is no denying that many of Choksi's plans for the company had not met with their approval. Choksi wanted to expand aggressively. This means raising equity and diluting control, which the other three vehemently opposed. Eventually, Atul sold his 9% stake in Asian Paints to its direct competitor ICI India, a subsidiary of ICI UK. However, this sale was blocked by the board of Asian Paints. Finally, after 8 months, ICI sold half of its stake to a domestic mutual fund and remaining stake to Asian Paints promoter families. Thus, Atul exited from the companies in 1997 and went on to head Upcotex Industries Limited, one of the leading producers of performance emulsion polymers in India, and a division of Asian Paints until 1991. After this episode, Asian Paints hired management consultants Booz Allen Hamilton to guide them on the way forward. The key benefits of this exercise were: A. Best practices of all the manufacturing plants were brought together to improve operating efficiencies. B. Working capital, which allowed them to focus more on the core business rather than spend time managing inefficient manual process. D. Improved organizational structure across 3 business units: domestic, decorative, international, and industrial paints. A former employee of Asian Paints recalls, all credit to the directors, etc. Separately, the professional management team shifted the firm's focus of relying on in-house development of information technology infrastructure to procuring IT from third-party vendors. In 1999, the first phase of this included procuring software for supply chain management from I2 Technologies, a US-based company, which centralized and automated a large part of the process of demand forecasting, production planning, and raw material management. The second phase included setting up of ERP, Enterprise Resource Planning software in July 2000 across India. During our discussions with him, Anand said, the demand forecasting offered by I2 software helped us a lot. Earlier, there was manual demand forecasting with manual interpretation of data, whereas here there was a demand planner with analysts who were trained to look at demand patterns in a more systematic manner. Through these initiatives, the firm saw a significant reduction in working capital cycle days and improvement in ROCs, as highlighted in Exhibits 12 and 13. In its decorative paint businesses in India, AkzoNobel and Kansai Nerolac during the phase, the firm also accelerated the expansion of its international footprints with the acquisition of a paint company in Sri Lanka in 1999, setting up of greenfield operation in Oman, acquisition of a paint company called SCIB Chemicals in Egypt in 2002, and acquisition of a controlling stake in Berger International Singapore for 580 million in 2002. In 2013, Asian Paints launched a new vertical, Home Improvement Division, with the acquisition of Sleek, a modular kitchen player in India. This was followed by acquisition of SS, a bathroom fitting company in India. What is Asian Paints' secret sauce? Section 1. Focusing on the core business. We have consciously stuck to a sector which is growing and offers decent potential and have always strived for excellence across all functional areas. But it is not because somebody is observing us and is going to applaud us. We have just stuck to our knitting sensibly as the sector has evolved over decades. Now we are moving towards becoming value-added services like color consultancies, recalled Jalaj Dani, member of the promoter family Asian Paints, in our meeting with him. For the Choksis, Danis and Wakils, Asian Paints is the single biggest source of their wealth, and to give them credit, the promoters have refrained from pushing the companies during the 1990s due to unrelated diversification into sectors like financial services, weigh bridges, weighing machines, and hotels. Asian Paints identified and understood the twin drivers for growth, supply chain efficiencies and brand power, early on and have relentlessly focused on entrenching themselves further in the paint sector using these drivers. Following the departure of Atul Choksi in 1997, the remaining promoters have taken it upon themselves to focus on different divisions within Asian Paints, while the role of the managing director and CEO is held by an independent professional, KBS Anand. Anand, in our meeting with him in December 2005, said, "We have been lucky to have new jewels in the form of professional managers who attempted to do things that haven't been done before, and lucky to have management that allowed them to do such things." Asian Paints is the only paints company in the sector which has not seen a change in its controlling shareholders over the past 70 years. As shown in Exhibit 17, all change in controlling shareholder and significant presence of a foreign entity on the board of directors. Industry experts say that this consistency at the board level has helped Asian Paints maintain focus on execution of a stable long-term strategy over these decades. Section 2. Deeply built its competitive advantages across the 4 criteria of John K's IBAS framework, namely innovation, brands and reputation, architecture and strategic assets. I discuss each aspects below. Innovation. Over 70 years, Asian Paints has repeatedly excelled as the first steps ahead of the competition. This is evident across the firm's understanding of consumer demand, use of technology, and nurturing of professional talent. Competition has usually imitated Asian paints, and even then has always remained a few steps behind. There are three clear areas where Asian Paints has been ahead of competition. First, product innovation. Asian Paints understands its customers better than its competitions. The strength was possibly ingrained from its early days, the 1940s and 50s, when the promoters of Asian Paints deeply inculcated a culture of staying close to its customers. This proximity helped the company understand what product types, for instance, the launch of washable distemper in 1950s, color shades, deep shades rather than pastel shades, and pack sizes, smaller packs to help paint horns of the various parts of the country. As a result, at a time when most paint companies in India were focusing on institutional customers and large distributors in urban areas, Asian Paints was able to build the business starting with the smaller cities, rural market, and selling directly to dealers. Second, supply chain management. In the 1950s and 60s, large multinational corporations used to offer at least 180 days of credit period to their distribution channel. That is, shopkeepers, dealers, and distributors who supplied paints to retail customers, and allowed the channel to extend the credit period to as long as 1 year in some cases. This hampered entry into the market for the smaller players, given the high and rising working capital requirements from them to deal with the channel partners at a time when the cost of capital was as high as 18%. In that era, Asian Paints started the practice. For example, a shopkeeper would get a 3.5% extra discount if, without fail, he made payments on time throughout the next year. This discount encouraged leaders to pay before time, and the success of this practice led to the launch of cash discounts, where if a dealer made the payment in government price. These initiatives were a win-win. Asian Paints delivered its products to its dealers faster than its competition, and the dealers were able to manage their working capital cycles better. Supply chain management is a critical aspect for successes in the paint industry. Given the voluminous nature of the products, low margin for dealers, Asian Paints has a track record of remaining the leader on this front. Some initiatives it has taken to strengthen this moat include being the first company to use mainframes in the early 1970s to forecast demand for better inventory management. Start branch billing on computers in the late 1970s. Import a color computer in 1979, which helped reduce tinting time from 5 or 6 days to 4 hours. And use GPS for tracking movement of trucks carrying finished goods in the channel. Asian Paints also established a network of regional distribution centers in the 1980s and 1990s. Over the previous 5 years, this has been replaced by larger distribution centers close to manufacturing plants. Third and finally, empowerment of professionals. Asian Paints was unique amongst Indian promoter-led firms. It allowed professionals to take control of middle and senior management roles as early as 1969. Although many second-generation members of the four promoter families were engaged in the business in 1970s and thereafter, they have been given strict instructions, especially when the latter had made responsible for the specific function. Brand. Asian Paints' investment in its brands are legendary. I am reminded of a meeting back in 2013 with a former employee of Kansai Nerolac, a competitor of Asian Paints, who told me Asian Paints is the only paint company which has me like Gattu and Utsav, as well as for premium products like Royal and Apex. All the other paint companies have been able to create brand recall only for the mother brand like Nerolac, Dulux and Berger. Asian Paints has consistently maintained its focus on advertising from as early as 1950s. More importantly, its customers. For instance, one of the recent advertisement campaigns of Royal Play, a premium emulsion, captures the emergence of nuclear families living in metropolitan cities with long office working hours. The advertisement campaign called Surprise Your Spouse has the hashtag line, "He is working late, watch your home's makeover transform his mood, and she is visiting her parents for the weekend. Let a transformed home welcome her back." As India's economy grew since the 1950s, so did customers' demands. To its credit, Asian Paint capitalized on the emotional appeal of a house or ghar and linked it to a paint. Indeed, a freshly acquired and newly painted house is a matter of pride for any family. Asian Paints and its advertising agencies have changed their messaging to maintain this emotional connection with their target audience. Three examples can indicate this. Asian Paints mascot in 1954, mostly in printed arts, with the tagline, "Any surface that needs painting needs Asian Paints." Unlike its peers who were focusing on upwardly mobile urban audiences in their adverts during the 1970s, Gattu, designed by R.K. Lakshman, whose Common Man cartoons were famous throughout India, appealed to the masses and helped Asian Paints become a leader in the smaller cities. Gattu remained the mascot for Asian Paints until 2002. Beyond this year, the firm started changing its positioning in favor of premium households. Second, in my discussions with him in December 2015, Anand highlighted, in 2002, we did the entire rebranding exercise, having understood that the paint is the most important thing driving the feel good factor at home, which, after the family, is the most important thing for an individual. That is why we came up with the theme, हर घर कुछ कहता है, क्योंकि इसके अंदर कोई रहता है. Every house says something about it, since someone lives in it. We tried to personify paint as a mechanism to transform and personalize every individual's home. And finally, in 2000, underwent another meaningful rebranding exercise. As Amit Singhal, VP Sales and Marketing, stated in a media release in 2012, the change in our brand identity signifies our intent to establish a deeper connect with our customers, as well as ensure that Asian Paints is able to steer the formation that creates the AP design, highlighting the easy flow, smoothness, dynamism, and possibility that our solution and offering will provide. Architecture. I met Rama Bijapurkar, a leading market strategy consultant and an independent director on the boards of several notable companies in 2015 October, while I was finalizing the 2015 coffee can portfolio for Ambit's clients. Amongst other things, we discussed Asian Paints and how its internal processes stack up relative to the competition. Rama told me, I have known Asian Paints for 30 years, and all through this period, they have been obsessed about hiring the best people, about having the best IT, and the smartest technology-driven processes. They started obsessing about talent and the smartest technology-driven processes. They started obsessing about talent and technology way before anybody else in India. There are three critical aspects to Asian Paints architecture. A. Creating a unique working culture that nurtures talent. B. Using it to improve competitive advantages, shape evolution of the firm. Asian Paints does not offer the highest pay packages to business school graduates. Then how does the firm manage to achieve one of the lowest attrition rates in its junior and middle management team across the consumer sector in India? Choksi began the tradition of hiring India's most seasoned fund managers who invested in Asian Paints when it went public in 1982, explained this in our discussion with him. Asian Paints is not about few individuals. The average quality of employees in any role is markedly superior to any other company, and that comes by hiring better people at all levels consistently. Nirmesh Prakash, the former manager marketing Asian Paints during the period 2000 to 2005, highlighted, out of the 100 people on the work floor, if one is not a cultural fit, he would be easily visible as a misfit. But the remaining 99 would be very similar to each other in their intellect, motivation levels, and work ethics. In my discussions with the recruitment coordinators at India's best business schools, I discovered that Asian Paints is a preferred employer.
What is more interesting, however, is the manner in which Asian Paints maintains a professional working environment that enhances its attractiveness as a preferred company to work for. I spoke to several employees, past and present. Discussions lead me to believe that the following practices are instrumental in helping Asian Paints nurture talent. First, rapid career progression for those who perform. After a management trainees join Asian Paints, they are given significant authority and responsibility in their roles, and if they perform, they get promoted very quickly. A former employee of Asian Paints told me in October 2015. Within 6 months of joining Asian Paints in 1996 as a management trainee, I was given independent responsibility to manage one of the 6 regional distribution centers. In less than 5 years, I was handling a large portfolio of raw and at regular intervals, always ensured a steep learning curve and acted as a motivation for me. Second, empowerment allows creativity. Once an employee gains independent responsibility to manage a depot, branch, manufacturing plant, there is a high degree of accountability. Also, there is ample room for an employee to be creative and take independent decisions. Asian Paints has one of the best process of internal reporting and budgeting, and therefore performance of each individual or branch or business unit is clearly measurable. This followed up with fairness in performance appraisal and a disciplined process of carrying out review meetings, which are attended by representatives of the 3 families and all members of the senior management team. The fund manager cited previously told me, in this review, there is from what has happened so that the things can improve in the future. Jalajdani, member from one of the promoter families of Asian Paints, also told us, you learn a lot from interacting with people in this organization if you have the humility to listen to them. This firm has had a culture that has allowed the professionals to do what they like to do, which results in people delivering great ideas and doing great things. And finally, senior employees are looked after well. Once an employee spends 10 to 15 years with Asian Paints, his relationships with the promoter families and senior management professionals become extremely strong. Thereafter, the organization will intervene to help the employee's family for any need in his personal life. Some examples of such interventions I came across in our interactions with some current and former senior employees of Asian Paints include care support when an employee or his family member encounters debilitating illness and taking care of the well-being of employees' family members during any emergency situation. As Jalajdani told me, it is about the feeling of being a family. From funerals to weddings to attending other personal events, it is the about it. Who adds, I once asked Choksi why Asian Paints does not pay the managers well. He answered that while we are the best paymasters to salesmen, clerks and laborers, we don't need to pay the managers very highly. When I bring these boys from business schools, there is a price that they have to pay to get. I know some of them will leave after getting trained because they will be offered a better salary within the first 3 to 5 years of joining. But those who will remain with me over the long term will be looked after well by the organization on all fronts. Asian Paints use of technology is well known. It invests capital to buy and use best in class technology to improve its supply chain efficiencies and working capital management, which are the 2 biggest drivers of competitive advantage in the paint industry. For instance, mainframes were used for demand forecasting as early as 1970s. Who was the factory manager of the company's Ankleshwar plant in Gujarat in the 1980s recalls. In 1980, the Bhandu plant in Mumbai used to operate with 1,600 workers. Ankleshwar started production with only around 2050 workers. Capacity expansion in Patancheru near Hyderabad was with less than 100 workers in 1985. All thanks to better technology to automate manufacturing processes and higher productivity. Many of its new plants across the country are controlled through IT servers placed in Mumbai. They where operators sit and operate across all segments of manufacturing. IT encompasses other functions such as human resources as well. Key result areas, popularly known as KRAs or in office parlance, are given to the middle management employees who are encouraged to increase the productivity of operations through their specific roles. Mangesh Pathak, former purchase manager, recalls, around 2001, I was clearly told that if I take steps to improve the working capital pertaining to my portfolio of raw material purchase, the firm would see a certain increase in percentage points in overall ROCE. A very clear link was established between companies' overall goals and the key performance indicators KPIs of a functional manager. The benefits of using IT are also visible at dealers level. One of the largest dealers of Asian Paint told us, I order products from Asian Paints 5 to 10 times in a day and receive supplies 3 to 4 times daily. Until 1995 to 96, we used to call the depot to place our orders. Then they started their call centers in 2002-2003. Now they incentivize us by giving us between rupees 500 and rupees 10,000 extra per month depending on the order size. Even if others copy this in a few years, they will have frequent stocks out and hence won't meet our requirements, Asian Paints management told us. Over the period of 2000 to 2015, to resource for everyone in the company rather than being just a low priority support function. IT is like electricity, it is a part of daily life. It works as a great integrator of all operating functions across the firm. And finally, Asian Paints has a genuinely independent board. As one of India's most seasoned fund managers told me in October 2015, unlike many other companies, independent directors on the board of Asian Paints are not invited based on their relationship with the promoters, but because of the contributions they make as board members. The board gets very seriously involved in the appointment of the CEO and of all senior management personnel one level below the CEO. This avoids any bias that the promoter family or other executive directors might have. Many Indian companies fill their board service to the legal requirements that mandates that 50% of the board should compromise to independent directors. Asian Paints is among that rare breed of companies whose boards are truly independent. Their board is composed of 14 directors. Of these, 6 are a part of promoter families, 2 from each of the family and CEO. The remaining 7 independent directors are credible individuals with relevant backgrounds. Asian Paints' key strategic assets are A. Wide geographical spread of its supply chain network, including manufacturing plants and depots, which help service its dealers efficiently. B. In the industry. Both of these assets have been built over the past 7 decades and are near impossible to replicate by its competition. A. Network of manufacturing plants and depots. Asian Paints has one of the largest number of manufacturing unit and depots across the country in its supply chain network. More importantly, the firm leverages on a wider network of manufacturing plants and depots to operate at the highest ratio of revenues per depot or revenues per manufacturing plant, thereby helping improve inventory turnover and working capital turnover for the overall business. For instance, over the past decade, Asian Paints has been setting up its distribution centers next to the manufacturing units. These distribution centers will serve as a large format hubs for inventory storage of both fast, while for slow moving SKUs, the DC network will aim at replacing the RDC network in its entirety. For the fast moving SKUs, the DC network will aim at reducing the transfer of surplus stock from one depot to another within the distribution network. The company's size and efficient number of dealers, 35,000 vs 21,000 for Berger. With only around 125 depots in its supply chain, its revenue per depot is approximately rupees 100 crores, more than twice that of the next highest which is around 40 crore per depot for consignor lac. Its revenue per factory is approximately rupees 1500 crore, twice that of the next highest, just over rupees 700 crore for again consignor lac. B. Relationship with the dealers built through non-transactional initiatives. The company's relationship with transactional initiatives. The company's relationship with the dealers have been built over decades. These deep-rooted relationships go beyond its stellar IT systems that make dealers' life easier. Several dealers have told us that Asian Paints has gone beyond its call of duty to help its channel partners. Paints has gone beyond its call of duty to help its channel partners should they face any unexpected problems. As Jalajdani told me, dealers are part of our family. If we find that they are affected due to any unforeseen events such as riots, floods, earthquakes, etc., we ensure that the best support is provided to them in every possible manner, including extending the credit period so as to help them get back on their feet. And added to this, 50% of the dealers don't check their account despite having access to a web portal which gives them real-time updates on their account. The founding chief investment officer of leading equity mutual fund told me in October 2015. Distributors are the bedrock of Asian Paints' success, and their relationship is mutual. They look after Asian Paints, and Asian Paints looks after them. Section 3. Capital allocation. Capital allocation decisions have by and large been focused on its core business. Cash generated has been judiciously plowed back in the business and used for expansion. Even for its daily operations, Asian Paints has regularly invested in technology that has strengthened its competitive position and improved operating efficiencies, irrespective of the payback periods. Some examples of such investments include investments in mainframes in the early 1970s, color computers in 1979, tinting machine 1970s, color computers in 1979, tinting machines in the 1990s, I2 technology software in 1999, ERP software in 2000. The expansion of its manufacturing facilities has been timely and has included backward integration to manufacture important intermediates in the paint manufacturing process like phthalic anhydride and pentaerythrol. Its international forays, however, have seen mixed results. Starting from Fiji in 1978, Asian Paints now has a presence in the Caribbean, the Middle East, Southeast Asia. The strategy underlying these international expansion initiatives has been A. Leveraging on the company's skills and capabilities in India to capitalize on growth opportunities in other emerging countries. B. Gaining exposure to the rest of the world as the firm prepares for long-term industry as much as possible, since that is what the firm knows the best. Speaking about the acquisition of Berger International Singapore and SAIB Egypt in 2002, Jalajdani, the head of international operations of Asian Paints and newly appointed chairman of Berger International, said, "The emerging markets have 50% of the world population, and this is where we see potential upside as we seek to draw more efficiencies out of the acquisitions we have just completed." Further, the company will implement core structures in Berger's operations worldwide for increased plant efficiencies and increased asset productivity. It will focus on improving working capital management through various initiatives and introduced IT in areas of operations where essential. While the strategy to expand overseas was well founded, these ventures have been a drag on the balance sheet. The company's capital allocation in overseas business has not borne fruit even after more than 20 years of consistent investment. To its credit, Asian Paints has resisted the temptation of pumping in more money and stretching its balance sheet to make the international business profitable. As a result, the share of overseas business over a period of time, and although it still remains significant. Over the past decade, Asian Paints seems to be preparing for the future by investing in A. Business related to homes such as kitchenware and bathroom fittings. B. services that could disrupt the traditional Indian model of. In 2013, Asian Paints acquired Sleek Group, which catered to the organized modern kitchen space. In FY15, Asian Paints acquired the front-end business of SS, a high-quality player in the bathroom fitting segment. Albeit small in size, only rupees 230 crores of total assets. These acquisitions came across as a deviation from the strategy to remain focused on paints. However, the rationale behind these acquisitions is to protect the distribution channel of mom and pop stores in the paint industries from disruptive evolution of technology. This disruption could emerge as the paint industry evolves, either open large format stores with value addition to the customers, which could dilute the importance of the traditional mom and pop store network. To explain this, involved in painting a home has increased to approximately 65% of the project cost of a household from around 10% in 1980. This is because labor costs have grown at 9 to 10% CAGR over FY 06 to 15 versus a mere 3% CAGR in paint prices. With these trends likely to continue, there is a high likelihood that 15 to 20 years from now, labor costs will be around 90% of the overall paint project cost. Thus, in the future, it makes more sense to buy paint from a store and paint a home yourself rather than employ painters and laborers. Indeed, this is a practice in developed economies. Once this happens, two consumption patterns are likely to emerge. First, consumers will be willing to pay for labor involvement if there is a service-oriented value addition attached to it. This could include decor consultancy services either on the shop floor or at your doorstep, or faster, cleaner, highly organized way of executing the paint project. To this end, Asian Paints has tried operating experience stores in Mumbai, Delhi and Kolkata, Color Idea stores, which provide color consultancy in the mom and pop stores, Home Solutions Painting Service, which currently execute 20 to 25,000 projects each year. Introduction of Royal Play high-end texture self-appointed painter. After the completion of that project, I appointed Asian Paints Home Solution for textured paint to be done on the walls. Although Asian Paints Home Solution charged me a rate 15 to 20% higher than my self-appointed painter, I enjoyed the experience where there was a team of painters led by an Asian Paints employee who was very professional in his conduct, took great care of my existing furniture and got the work done without any delay. Next time I get my house painted, I will just appoint Asian Paints Home Solution for an end-to-end service. Second, a DIY model will emerge. Currently, households do not accept a DIY approach because A. Without sophisticated tools being available, DIY painting process is tiring, dirty, cumbersome, and lacks uniform in quality. B. At 60 to 65% of the project cost, labor involvement is affordable for many households. However, with the introduction of sophisticated tools like the ones being introduced by Berger, and with over 90% of the paint project cost being labor, both these factors are likely to change in favor of the emergence of DIY model over the next couple of decades. The experience in developed countries like the US and the UK shows that several small-sized exclusive stores like Sherwin-Williams 100 such exclusive retail stores replace the traditional mom and pop stores, whose share in industry or aggregate sales has dropped to 10 to 11% or less in the US and the UK. New entrants into the industry establish their presence through large format DIY stores, which are offer private label paint products at 5 to 10% lower prices compared to the incumbents, and also offer value added services to the customers. The company's management is aware that potentially disruptive changes lie ahead. Hence, through the launch of value-added services like Asian Paints Home Solutions, Color Consultancies, Color Idea Stores, and its entry into the home improvement solution business. Asian Paints intends to convert its existing mom and pop store network into a one-stop shop for all the needs of the evolving paint customer. In our discussions, Anand highlighted, in a few months, we plan to open our first home improvement solution store in Coimbatore. It will have all our products as well as other products, as we don't have the entire product range right now that can be offered to learn. It will take us time to learn and perfect the business. That is our strategic game plan. When asked about how the firm views the risk of dilution of ROCE through such a move, the management said, at the moment, home improvement business is too small to have any significant impact on the overall ROCE of the firm. But if you are talking about building long-term strength with your channel partners, whatever ROCE we lose in the new business will be more than offset by an increased ROCE in the future business. Asian Paints astonishing share price outperformance. A rupee invested in Asian Paints in January 1991 is worth rupees 299 in April 2016, implying a compounded annual return of 25%. That same rupee would be worth rupee in the Sensex, implying a CAGR of 14%. Thus, Asian Paints has outperformed the Sensex by 11.6 times over the past 25 years. This outstanding performance has been driven by the promoters' deep focus over the last 70 years on the paint businesses. This focus has deepening of its competitive modes via focus on hiring good people and getting the best out of them, alongside investing in IT systems which improve demand forecasting and supply chain management. Finally, Asian Paints has taken prudent capital allocation decisions with wild focus on ROCE.